thanks for coming out in this sort of weather. But I have the presentation I give at Brit. I call it "Think Like a Tree." Because that's sort of where your mind wants to be when you go in to prune. You kind of want to know how the tree is going to react, what sort of growth patterns it has, what you can remove, what you can't. But another big part of pruning is like the whole environment that we're in and sort of taking that into account. So you can see that you got some shade here, but it's not fully covered. I'm not completely certain where our directions are here, but that's certain east. So the sun comes from over this way, so north that way, southern exposure. So this probably gets a little bit of shade from this, probably not much, but you can see it's pretty well exposed. Maybe some afternoon shade over here. So we know that it's going to get a decent amount of light. And basically when I go about pruning in the garden, one of my big things is to get to the essence of the tree, to make it look good, So what does that mean, So we want to get to a spot where we're kind of showcasing the branch structure and getting rid of sort of things that are redundant. So, like I can already tell, like in through here seems pretty thick. If we're thinking like a tree, the tree wants to put out as much growth as it can to collect as much energy as it can. Think of a leaf as like a solar panel. They're just putting out solar panels where they can to collect energy. Now, being in a garden setting, we want the tree to look good, so this is an opportunity to not only thin it out, but also promote the growth that we want on the branches that we want. So things I start to look for are things that are growing on the top of the branch. Not to say that I would wipe out all these branches. This is what we call tachime, or standing bud. It's on the top of the branch. That thing is just going to want to grow straight up. And a good example of that is right here. You see how that branch is on the top, and it's kind of like a sore thumb, right? So that's like an automatic. That just goes.
Is that because it's blocking? You want an area in there?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. But again, it's growing straight up, and it was eventually just going to keep growing in there. Eventually become another trunk. Long ago, we probably would have wanted to do something with one of these two trunks. You see how they're sort of competing in there right now? Now, if it was my garden, I might make a decision, but since it's not my garden, I'm going to reserve that for one of the gardeners. I'm not going to go crazy hard on this tree. But so we just start sort of working it out from there. And like, we also got to think about what our space is. We got a pathway here and a pathway here. We have there's certainly room to walk over here, but we want to think safety wise. Things at eye level, might be a consideration. But at the same time, we want branches down at this because it kind of gets to the essence of the tree. So, if we're looking in here, these are becoming redundant. See how this branch is essentially doing the same thing as that? And it's kind of clunky. So, and this is sort of crossing underneath that one. So you can get rid of this whole thing right here. See how it just cleans it up a little bit?
Is that the one in the middle, sort of?
Yeah, it was sort of right here. And like, see, this is a tachime, this is on top, so we get rid of that. To maybe cut this out. And you can see how I'm pruning to stuff that's either on the bottom of the branch or on the side of the branch, to lateral branching. Maybe just that was sort of a dead piece. Again, it's on the top. So if we start looking in through here, this one almost looks like it's growing back in towards that. See, we want that part of the tree to start growing out, and these are just going to start competing with one another. And again, you can see it's kind of on the top, right? So we can, if you're unsure about something, you can always take off more. So sometimes what I do is start with less, maybe start up here. And then this one's sort of growing back in too, so you can get rid of that. You don't want to leave stubs as much as you can. You want to get a pretty tight prune on it. You want to prune to sort of what we call the branch bark collar, where it's sort of a swelling around the branching. That's sort of where the plant will compartmentalize the wound. It won't like heal the thing, but it will cover itself over. So that's what you see. Like even on the post oak there, you see that lowest branch, almost like it's like where you can see where there was a branch.
Belly button.
Yeah, exactly. That's that donut shape is the tree compartmentalizing that wound and covering it over. So again, like, you know, this one here, you know, that's just growing. We want stuff to be growing out and away, not necessarily back in towards the plant. So again, that would probably be one that I go ahead and just get rid of.
Now, would you take that whole limb off?
Which one?
You want it more weeping, sweeping. Well, the one that you're working on, because.
Well, again, that's not my decision to make.
But would you?
No. No.
I mean, I like weeping, sweeping, but everybody hires their gardeners, including their post oaks, and they just limb them up. We call it sort of a pruning cut.
Yeah, no, because again, it's not really the essence of what this plant is. You know, it's got, you know, low branching is a good thing, you know, because it makes for an interesting tree. You know, if you just start cutting off all your low branching, you got nothing to look at, you know. But by thinning it out, you're providing more light to get down to those low branching, which will keep it alive. Otherwise, it would just die, you know. You know, this branch here, you know, has been damaged. You could see someone probably was yanking on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, probably.
It's not damaged.
Well, you know, you could actually tie this. That's another little trick I use sometimes when branches get damaged like this. It depends on when it happens, you know, but preferably when this happened, you'd want to wrap it and tie it, and those vascular cambial layers will sort of, I mean, that's essentially grafting. You know, that's kind of what we're doing. You know, but this, I mean, it's probably fine. What I might do is just get rid of this part here.
The broken bit.
Yeah. I'm just being careful not to cut all the way through it. Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be weaker, but you know, that's for the gardener's decision to make. I don't want to impose my will too much. So, like, you know, this interior branching is kind of interesting. We kind of want to keep some of it, but again, you can kind of see how it's starting to get clunky in there. So maybe what we do is just take off that one. Again, this is starting to sort of bump into stuff that's a little bit better. So, and again, it's sort of growing straight up. And this is where the sort of the aesthetic eye comes into play. Kind of imagine this not being here. It starts to show off more of the essence of these branches. And it's just kind of cleaner. Now you can see we got a jumbled mess in through here. And that's where, you know, a while ago, it would have been better to do some of this pruning.
Oh.
At this point in time, those are decisions to make that you know, I don't know, you could, I just, you know, it's not my garden, so I'm always a little hesitant, you know, without the gardener being here.
Just pointing out what you would have done.
So what you could do, actually, and you know, we could do this. I don't even think you'd notice. I think by removing that one, like if you start looking up in the canopy and it's like, okay, you know, we would actually be losing this sort of main leader, but it's got plenty of stuff behind it to fill back in eventually. So it's kind of not the...
So you're going for that dominant one?
This guy. So it's not really the type of branch I would do this cut typically on, but actually I think what I'll do is I'll cut it out and then I'll demonstrate a cut. So again, sort of right above that lateral branch. And so this is actually demonstrating. You can see how the branch is sort of leaning that way, right? So when you make that cut, it's gonna start falling that way, right? And what happens is it starts pinching the blade. So what I do is I start about halfway, then I switch to the other side, and then you don't get blade pinch. And see, it just cut out real clean. Yeah, getting it out might be a thing. This is simply just to make it easier to get the stuff out of here. So,
It really doesn't touch the shape.
yeah, and it just kind of cleans it out a little bit. And now, you know, one thing I really use a lot is the amount of light that actually comes through the tree. You know, we were in the spacing. Remember I talked about the spacing between things? This is a practical purpose of that, you know, the spacing between branching. So now we can start to see, well, this is really sort of thickened through here, isn't it? So I wanted to show you the sort of 3-cut method. And this is for like bigger branches that are more lateral in nature, similar to something like this or like that. So for bigger branches. So, you know, because if you were to cut, and like, let's say it's a big branch on a tree, and you start cutting on the top, well, what's going to happen? You know, the weight of the branch is going to start making it go that way. And you probably had this happen if you made any cuts, it can peel the bark. So you start on the bottom, so far, about halfway to a third, and then you go a little bit behind it, and then you finish your cut. And what happens, it just falls off right there. And then if you wanted to, they call it 3-cut because that's 1 cut, 2 cut, and then you go back to where you want the cut to be and finish it off there because there's no weight at that, essentially no weight at that point. Right? Okay. So one thing to know about making a cut like we did there, you know, it's going to stimulate growth to come out there. So what we expect to see in the spring is a lot of whippy growth coming out. And that's where you come back and easily snip those out. Sometimes we want that. Sometimes, like if we don't have any options, and depending on the plant material, if it can do this, you'll just cut a branch in half. That's where you see the crepe murder, right? Because basically you're trying to make the thing smaller, and but it'll promote growth. So, I'm kind of all over the place with this because I don't have my presentation sort of in mind, or, you know, I haven't given you my presentation to refer back to, so I'm kind of winging it here. So now we want to start sort of looking at, you know, we got a lot of jumbliness going on, so we want to start thinning that out. We also, remember, we want to think like a tree, you know, so we got all these branches down here that we want to keep and promote. But what's happening is all this stuff on the top is starting to grow up and out like a plant wants to do, you know, wants to search for light. So eventually these will get shaded out. So we need to prune harder up top. So you want it more pyramidal in shape, right? Wider out on the base, more narrow on the top in this particular case. So again, we can see this one's starting to grow into top. Again, Tachume, so we can clip that out. And it's really, it starts to become a pattern of things, you know. Again, on the top. On top. Actually, I'd just take that whole thing out. This one's okay because it's kind of coming from the back. So this is sort of where it's a process of elimination, you know. Which one do you keep, which one do you save? And you have to sort of start thinking about it.
But when you go out to the end of the limb that you just had, and out up there, once it gets out there, it gets kind of wet.
Well, and that might be part of just the plant itself, this particular species. So what I start to do is just start getting rid of the stuff that you know you want to get rid of and see what you got left. Like, you know, all this stuff on the top, just, you know, we want to get rid of that.
What kind of tree is it?
It's some sort of olive. I'm not exactly certain of which one it is, but it's some sort of olive.
It's an olive tree. Tree service provider. They just want to limb up, so they always go for the low stuff.
Well, that's the easy way to do it.
And I
And
know they do shade out.
right. I was gonna bring my ladder, and I probably should have to actually finish this tree out properly, but I didn't. Yeah. So, you know, we start looking at, you know, see how these sorts of things start getting clunky and in the way of one another. You know, it might be best just to, you know, I kind of like how the branch is coming from back there, but maybe we try to promote these branches.
Rubbing branches.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Like this in here. Yeah, not ideal. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, long ago we probably wanted to take care of that, and you can see how it's going to be a situation here. But, you know, it's kind of hard to fix that at this point, right? So we just sort of let that be, and you know, it kind of tells the story of a tree. You know, that's what we're sort of looking for in a garden. You know, character. And by pruning this way, you develop the character of the tree, because you can start to see, you know, we'll ramify it back, meaning we'll keep pruning it back, and that's how you get sort of the zigzag nature of the branching, especially like in pine trees. Where is that? That's such a thing. Yeah, so, you know, kind of looking back on this one, it's like, yeah, maybe we could do a couple other things in through here. Starting to grow back towards the tree. Again, we're directionally pruning at this point in time. We're redeveloping the direction of where the tree is growing.
So if you had something that you want, instead of, you seem to be going horizontal, you're encouraging
That's right.
horizontal growth. If you actually wanted vertical growth, you just do the opposite.
Yeah, but, you know, like, why would you want that?
Well,
Because of a
road.
space.
Right.
A space consideration.
Right. Or like in a hedge.
Right.
You know, so that's sort of, you know, I talk about, in my presentation, I talk about why do we prune. Ultimately, it's about control. You know, we want to, you know, we're very controlling people in general, so we want to have a say of what the thing is going to do. But it's knowing why and how you need to control it. So like by doing it like this, I keep it smaller. You know, leaving the stuff that grows up and cutting off all the lateral things, one, it's going to make for a boring tree. You won't have any interest down low here. And then two, it's just going to grow more. It's just, you know, by leaving, because those are those apically dominant buds. And by cutting out the apically dominant buds, you're spreading that out through the tree and promoting more of this lateral branching. So again, I'm just sort of cleaning up sort of stuff that, you know, like probably not the best orientation. And actually this thing is dead, more or less. So a good trick, if you don't know, to see if something's dead, you can do the rub test. See how there's no green in that versus so it's sort of like you kind of, with this tree, you kind of have like almost two tiers, right? You know, you kind of have this lower branches, this is pretty cool, and then you got this sort of upper thing. So we really want this thing to sort of be itself. Now see how like this one is starting to grow up? You know, it's technically sort of tachi, but this is the dominant branch off of this. So maybe not cutting it right here so much, but maybe we start whittling it down further on out. Most people don't. Most people don't. All right, so here's the other sort of thing. You know, pardon me from jumping around a lot, but in my presentation it has a little bit more of an order. I talk about pruning in 4D. 4D. So 3D, we all have a pretty good concept of what that is. What's the fourth D? time. It's time. What the thing is going to do over time. So by doing it like this, we're promoting this lateral growth to grow on, right? So we got to think about what the tree eventually will do. And that's what we're getting at. So like some of these more aggressive cuts, yeah, they are aggressive. Thing's going to grow. It's going to fill back in. So we're kind of pruning to that. So I got a little situation here about which one I want to keep. They're kind of doing the same thing. So then I start, again, this is sort of like a mental sort of checklist. All right, well, which one's more visually appealing? This one has more of a curve to it. So I take that one out and then maybe I just chop it down a little bit. This one's coming off the backside.
Lateral growth's better than
vertical
vertical growth.
Yeah, and for what we're trying to do, keep the tree small, in shape, visually appealing, because the lateral growth, your eye sees that more. The vertical growth is just like but the lateral, like, you remember on the one of the slides, you could see the pine trees have like these very lateral sort of pads, and it's like sort of stacking. It's just a visual thing that they tell you about in school. So yeah, you can see I've really kind of worked this section. That's probably pretty good. So we start looking at the plant and say, well, how is it weighted correctly? Is there like more to one side than the other? Do we need to thin it out in the other places? And again, I wish I would have brought my ladder.
I wonder if Trace has one.
Maybe.
Might be one day.
I'm not too concerned about it. I'll figure it out. So yeah, again, it's just going through the process. Looking for things that are growing straight up, taking those out. Like, this is, this little bit here, these things are doing the same thing. It's just making a cluster in here, so just get rid of that. It's like, do we really need it? Which is more interesting, this big, long, straight branch that doesn't have any movement, or this branch right here?
I want to guess the other.
Well, the other thing to remember is I've been doing this for a while, so it's sort of like just second nature to me. But look, you got all this stuff that's going to eventually replace it, and it's a much more sinuous sort of movement. Where was it? It's a long, straight branch. It's just boring. So I'll kind of looking, so like this one is starting to grow over top of this, so exception is the rule, right? So this one is on the top like that, but it's really growing horizontally, right? So we can prune back to that. That's right, yeah. I'm trying not to trample the pansies here.
Two vertical ones right in there. This one and that one.
Yeah, so you're talking about this one here and this one here?
Well, no, the one next to it, the bigger one. Those are sort of vertical.
Well, and that's what the plant wants to do, right? So we kind of have to keep that all in mind. You kind of have to see what the nature of the plant is. And that's why, like even on the stuff that I did cut, you can see the main scaffold of the branches is growing up, right? But I'm trying to prune it enhance it a bit. So like this branch here, it starts on this side, but it crosses over this branch. It's probably just going to be a problem later on. So the options are either to take this one out or to take this one out. Which would y'all decide to do? Take this one out, A, or take this one out, B?
B.
A is the correct answer. See, because it's growing over top of this thing, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but if we're trying to make this an aesthetically appealing thing, and like long-term wise, this would be the one to get rid of. So now we're, well, luckily I only have one person that works for me, so. Well, and you know, he's a great guy and really good at a lot of things. Pruning is not one of them. So I send him about his way doing the things that he's good at, and I go out and work on pruning trees.
Are you telling me there's only 2 people that work at the Japanese garden?
That's what I'm telling you.
Do they take that entire space with 2?
And some very helpful volunteers and some other free labor that I get via the sheriff's department. So yeah, what I'm seeing over here is some dead branching. So with dead branching, you kind of want to like be an investigator and like, okay, why is this dead? You know, because like otherwise this is a pretty healthy looking tree, right? Why is this particular branch dead? So you start at the tips. You say, okay, there's no leaves out here. You know, we are along a path. You know, maybe there was some equipment, especially with all the construction going on. The exhaust hit it or something. So not necessarily a detriment to the entire tree. And if you start looking, well, there's some little bits of live growth on here. So, you know, let's just start cutting out the dead and see what's left. And see, even this has a varying degree of livingness to it, but not great color, right? You see, it starts like sort of green and then like not so. So if I had to guess, it's probably construction related. You know, I mean, start looking, you can see they have heavy equipment running through here. That heavy equipment has exhaust. This is right about sort of maybe at that range. So, and, you know, if we start thinking about that, well, what's our traffic patterns like? People walk right here. So we got to start thinking about, you know, this is a big thing for me working in a public space. I got to think about safety issues. So, you know, maybe, you know, we want this lower branching, but maybe we just rein it back just a little bit. This one's sort of growing up, so get rid of that. Into the path. This one's sort of doing the same thing as this one. Dead, dead, dying. Boring. Sort of not great placement for a branch. Sort of in between these two really nice branches that we want. This thing is like, this is growing on this branch coming this way, crossing over top of that. Probably too close for that. And there's some rot issues going on in there too. So this is a good example of things that we want to try to preserve. Good origination of where it came off of, meaning it came off of the side of the branch, but it's just sort of long and straight, kind of boring. So just prune it back by half. I've pruned 2 different branches that are growing sideways. This will actually make this branch stronger because there's no weight on the ends pulling it down. All that can be developed back here. So can you all see these little bits of growth right here? So that's what we call adventitious growth, or growth that's sort of like growing spontaneously somewhere. This is what you'll see a lot of the times when you make pruning cuts. It'll start growing from that cut. And this is essentially what crepe murder is. You make that cut and it blows out. So you can either leave it or get rid of it depending on if it's what you want. These, it's not what we want. They're growing straight up in the middle, so we just get rid of them. Sometimes you can just cut them in half and hope to get more lateral branching off of it. It's a method to build branching.
And will there be lots of those kind of growth in a few months?
Maybe. A lot of it depends on how vigorous the plant is as a grower. And when I say the plant, you know, the species, the location, soil type, how much water it's getting, all those things you gotta kind of keep in mind. This tree seems to be wanting to grow just fine, so I would suspect that there will be some, but not real aggressive, because it's not a real aggressive growing plant. So again, you can start to see it sort of thinning out a little bit. I can see it's a little thick in here. So again, I go through my process. You know, this branch here starts and it sort of forks right here and goes out that way, which is what we want. But this one is growing sort of straight up. Again, on the top of the branch, get rid of it. And now, this is where sort of, when you start pruning on the tips, on the ends, like I did here, you're really making some decisions on how the shape and the future of the plant is gonna go. Because those are major cuts. Like these, I suspect would be where we start to see some of those adventitious shoots. Because you can see it's a very strong branch, you know, and it just lost a bunch of growth. So we're thinking like a tree, it's like, oh, I gotta get more growth out there. So this is where we would probably start to see growth start to come back, which we would probably just cut out, which is easy because it's much smaller and supple. Again, on the top. Yeah, this is sort of budding into this thing, so just shorten. But out here, you know, this is where, you know, occasionally you want to take a step back. And this might be a good thing for y'all to come out here. And not necessarily just right here. You can also go to the other side of it and sort of start looking at the tree. So you can see there's, you know, we've gotten rid of a lot of the branches that are growing straight up, and it's starting to sort of take shape a little bit more. Some things I start to look at from looking at it. This branch. Can you see how if we got rid of this branch? Yeah, it's going to take a chunk of the tree out, but it's got all of this stuff in the middle back here to come behind it. I'm just going to impose my will on this thing. The gardener's not out here. He should be doing his job and being out here, right? So this could be a good opportunity to do the 3-cut method. So halfway or so on the bottom. Go a little bit behind it, and by a little bit on this one, I'm about a 1/2 inch or so behind it. Cut through. Now watch the branch start to fall back towards me. See how it's closing down? Now I'm not all the way cut through, or all the way through the branch. You can see I can just essentially peel it out of there. So now I make my 3rd cut the clean finish cut. And sometimes what I'll do is if like I'm in a tight spot where I don't want to hit the branch on the other side, I'll get it cut so far with the pruning saw and then come back in with my pruners and finish it out. So now we got this really interesting thing going on here with between these 2 branches. Now this is where we'll start to see growth pop out. So now we'll just sort of work these down a little bit. Again, to sort of take a step back.
When this big tree starts growing out of that, why it's going that way.
Potentially. Potentially.
That way when these fill out.
So again, we got another really strong branch doing a thing there.
They did take it out.
So this would be the spot where I'd probably, you know, just rein that back a little bit. Let me do a little bit more down here. That I could probably step into the tree a little bit.
I found 2 what I call dye bags. Oh, okay, that's not a dye bag.
it's dead.
This little guy thing.
Yeah, so you can see there's probably a cut made right there, and that's the stub. That's what we don't want. That's just gonna rot right there. See how it's just rotted? We'd prefer it to make the clean cut and make that wound heal over. Have a nice clean spot for that wound to heal over. Which, come back here in 2 years and you'll see how these wounds have healed over nice and cleanly. So again, you know, ideally, from a gardener's perspective, you start looking at what's happened in the past. Here and here. Maybe those cuts weren't the best thing as far as interest. Now maybe they were. Maybe they're just garbage branching, and you know, we wanted to look at more of the things going on in the ground plane. But to me, it's sort of like boring. You know, like we want to have branching down here. Unfortunately, this one got damaged, but this here, that's from the oak.
So with that damage, is it viable?
Oh yeah, it's viable. All this is living, growing. It can support it, but it's just weakened. You know, it's missing half of its structure. This is why I hate annuals. Gotta walk around them and. I guess I have to finish the whole thing out if I started, right? I'd just be rude if I didn't, right? I don't want to be rude.
Make it pyramidal now that you're gonna have to really severely wax those.
Yeah.
So the
I'm getting there.
So the wax is coming.
Yeah.
I want to take you home. I got trees that need some help.
So, see about. I'm looking.
What you taking?
I'm looking. Just trying to shorten. Don't have many great options to stand in here, so I gotta kind of be careful.
Yeah. We didn't have you on tape.
Yeah, I know. So again, this one's sort of growing up and back towards the inside of the tree. Maybe shorten these. Here's a good representation of what that adventitious growth is. That's what you would expect to see. And really, you can just peel that off. It's real supple, real soft, so you can just peel it off.
We'll try to repeat that same place.
Maybe.
Shortening.
Yeah. And really, I'm only doing this really to, you know, make the shape of the plant a little bit better. Now these are some pretty aggressive cuts. You're taking out the most powerful part of the plant, you know, at the top. So we would expect to see a lot of new growth. Well, you would expect to see a lot of straight up growth because it would be the quickest. Which, you know, on a tree like this, maybe do every couple years. Oh, I wish I had longer arms. Yeah. See, I just can't quite reach it what I want to do out there, so I'd have to figure out a different way. Again, sort of just thicken through here. Again, so starting with the stuff that's on the top. And then just finding a good sort of lateral branch to get to. So like this is what we call a heading cut. We're cutting the main growing branch off. So we want to prune to a size branch that has like, it's like a 2/3 sort of ratio. The size of the branch that you prune to, you want it to be about 1/2 to 2/3 size diameter of what you're pruning out. So if I look at this one has a good taper to it. And basically it just makes it look like you haven't done anything. You know what I mean? Like it looks natural. As opposed to just packing it off right here and there's nothing there. That's the way to do it. Again, trying to find stuff that's growing straight down, or not straight down, but on the bottom side of the branch, or laterally. So I look at my options here. It's like a little bit small for the taper, and it would look abrupt if I just did that. Whereas I could just go down to here, and it looks like it's a little bit more natural. Sort of a long, straight neck right there, so it'd be better just to chop it down to that. Maybe shorten these down just a little bit.
It's just crying for some help.
Oh yeah?
This one right over here, like right up there.
Oh yeah, I haven't quite gotten to that guy yet. Well, no, I can't leave it like that. Well, if you can't reach it, you just cut lower, right?
I love it. It's gonna be good. Yeah.
So you can see how this is starting to grow over top of this here, right? If you're looking at it straight up and down, this higher stuff is over top of this, which is sort of opposite of what we want. So we want to start reining this back a little bit. And again, I'm trying to find like branching that is evocative and is it looks good. So maybe I can start with that. Because it's not like I want to just necessarily chop it all out, which I know seems odd because that's what I've been doing, but what's he gonna do? I don't know. I'm guessing most of the time, but just joking. They're gonna freak out.
I don't think you have to worry about that.
What about that one right above you? Yes.
Yeah, maybe. Well, but here's the thing about it. It's like, you know, maybe we like it for now. We can always cut it out later. You know, this is, so now we again, we do our step back thing and we take a look at it. Now, if you take a step back and really take a look at it, you can see, oh, okay, there's like a shape starting to form. But obviously you can see we have an offender here.
Yeah.
It's really just a matter of figuring out how far to go back with it.
Yeah, the shape is really beautiful. Now every time I come here, I would even look this tree. Me too.
See, the best part about doing these sorts of things is that people clean up after me.
Prisoners?
Yeah, sometimes. All right, so it's starting to sort of take shape. This is really, it's important to really get a lot of different perspectives. So you want to think about where you're looking at it from. And for our purposes, it's guest purposes, right? So they're walking down the pathway. You know, one might argue that this sort of side of the branch is getting maybe a little too dominant. Maybe just shorten it up a little bit. But we don't want to just whack it out of there completely. When things start to sort of lean over like this, you know, that's when you know you sort of need to start thinking about shortening it up. interfering with all this down here.
Once you get
Only
started.
a few things.
So one thing I sort of like try to keep in mind is like, I try to think about if I'm one leaf on a tree and I want to maximize the exposure that I can to have sun. And that's why I kind of think about it when I'm doing the pruning, is how to do that but make it look good too.